Welcome back to the Core Online Learning channel, where we will be looking at some of our key characters from A Christmas Carol. Today we're going to be looking at Fred from A Christmas Carol. And don't forget, if you like the video, you can like and subscribe, and you can make requests in the comments as well. So anything that you would like to see me do, I'm happy to go over. So Fred, let's go over the importance of Fred as a character in the novella A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So if we start with everything you need to know about Fred, the first thing we want to start with is that he's a juxtaposing character. So that means that he's a contrast to Scrooge. It means he's the opposite. Now, juxtaposition is a technique, so you will get marks for this on your exam. You will get marks for saying he is a juxtaposing character because it is subject terminology. It is perfect to go in an exam. The reason that he is a juxtaposing character to Scrooge is because Fred embodies the Christmas spirit. Now, we can see that when Fred comes to Scrooge's office and asks him to dinner. There's this sort of very repetitive scene between them where Fred keeps saying to Scrooge, "Please come, Merry Christmas, Uncle," and Scrooge keeps replying with "Bah humbug," and he keeps replying with "Good day, goodbye." He's trying to get rid of Fred, so he's really pushing Fred away. Because what that symbolizes is him pushing away that Christmas spirit, pushing away the happiness, the joy of having a family on Christmas. Now, he is part of Scrooge's family, so Fred is part of Scrooge's family. He's his nephew, so that means he is the son of his sister, of Scrooge's sister. And therefore, Scrooge is basically shying away from that family dynamic, and Scrooge could be just like Fred. He chooses not to be like Fred. So clearly there's enough happiness in Fred's life for him to have this Christmas spirit and be a nice person. So therefore it would make sense to say Scrooge had the option to turn out like Fred. He had the option to be like Fred, and he chose not to. You know, they are influenced by very similar things, being part of the family. They're both influenced by, or they could have been influenced by, Fred's mother, Fan. And Fan shows Scrooge a lot of kindness and love, so she must have shown her son this same kindness and love. And yet Scrooge rejects those lessons and Fred embraces those lessons. We'll talk more about Fan in a later slide, but it is really important that it basically shows that Scrooge is choosing to be this way. Now, Fred also shows kindness to Bob when Scrooge doesn't. So when he goes into the office, he actually does acknowledge Bob. And there's very little prejudice in Fred. And by that, if you've watched the Scrooge video, you would see that Scrooge believes of the poor as surplus population. He believes in them. He believes that they are useless, that they are expendable. And by expendable, I mean, he doesn't think that they're important. He thinks you could lose them. He thinks they could pass away, and he wouldn't really care. But Fred actually acknowledges Bob, and he actually speaks to Bob like he's a human. So there's that lack of prejudice in Fred that we see in Scrooge. So there are a few quotations here or textual references that I want to go through. Remember, you can use a quotation or a textual reference. It's okay. You don't need an essay full of quotations. You can actively analyze something that has been mentioned in the text, but you don't need a quotation to zoom in on necessarily. So the last one is our textual reference and the first two are our quotations. So the first thing is that his face was ruddy and handsome. His eyes sparkled. There's a huge juxtaposition there to Scrooge. Scrooge is described as quite a frightening character. Clutching, wrenching, a covetous old sinner. He's so unfriendly that even guide dogs pull their owners away from Scrooge. He's so unapproachable. And then we've got Fred with this ruddy means sort of red, like pink cheeks, with this red face. He looks very warm. So that's where we're going to zoom in on that description. Being ruddy means you look very warm. He's handsome, meaning he's approachable. People like to speak to Fred. And his eyes sparkled. So again, he's approachable. There's that ability to approach Fred, to feel safe around him, and that's what's being emphasized by the description there. Whereas we don't see that with Scrooge. He is actively unapproachable. People do not ask him for directions. People do not ask him for the time. People actively avoid this man. Then the next quotation that we've got to show that he's a juxtaposing character is, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. Now here he's talking about Christmas, so bear that in mind. And he says, it has done me good and will do me good, despite the fact that it has never made me an excessively rich man. Now, Fred isn't poor. That's really important in this. Bob is poor. And Fred is not poor. He's just poor compared to Scrooge, because Scrooge is a miser who hoards wealth, as you would see if you look back at the Scrooge video. So Fred isn't interested in pursuing wealth. He's not interested in going full speed towards wealth, in gaining that much, the way that Scrooge is. Because remember, a miser is someone who hoards that wealth. Actually, Fred isn't actively pursuing wealth and money. Fred is pursuing happiness. And that's interesting here that he says it's not just good when something profits you. So that's what this quotation is really pointing out. It's not just good when something profits you, it's good when something actively does you good. It makes you feel good. And that's what Christmas does to Fred. And that's why he embodies this Christmas spirit. Now, another point is, and this is our textual reference here that we could zoom in on, is that he is genuinely upset when Tiny Tim dies. So Bob sees him on the street and tells him the sad news of Tiny Tim's death in this sort of flash forward that we get from the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. And Bob really expresses how sad he is to Fred, and Fred really expresses sympathy back. And we wouldn't really get that from Scrooge had he not seen the ghosts. Obviously, we do get that from Scrooge. He does get sad about Tiny Tim's death. But had he never seen the ghosts or met the ghosts, actually, Tiny Tim was just surplus to him. He was just an extra mouth for society to feed. And if you've watched the Scrooge video, you will see that sort of Malthusian idea that these people are surplus really dehumanizes them. Whereas, again, Fred doesn't have that prejudice towards the poor. And that's a really lovely thing from Fred. He's showing that people can be sympathetic. They can be good people. And then we move on to the fact that he's loyal. So he doesn't hold on to negative feelings like his uncle. He actively pushes away any negativity. And that makes him benevolent and kind. Now, even when he is treated poorly by Scrooge, he still wants him to come to Christmas dinner. He believes in second chances. He gives people second chances. And we've got this last quote. I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. So he says that he feels pity rather than anger. So he doesn't hold on to the things that Scrooge holds on to. And he also points out that actually the only person that suffers from Scrooge's misery really is Scrooge. Now, we know that's not necessarily true, because Bob suffers because he is not paid well enough and he is treated quite badly as an employee. However, actually the person who has the least love in his life and the person who is the most miserable is Scrooge. Bob has his family, at least. He may be poor, but he's got a very enriched life compared to Scrooge. So actually what Fred is pointing out here is this misery that people have, this chasing of wealth, this need to be a miser, the only person that is going to make miserable is you. If you're pursuing wealth over happiness, then you will always be chasing money and you will never be happy. And that's really a message from Dickens, because remember, that man really, really believed in charity and kindness and goodness. And that's what he's expressing here through the character of Fred. So we could say the character of Fred is a tool to express this idea that chasing wealth or pursuing wealth will never actually make you happy. So Fred is shown to be a lot wiser than his uncle, and he doesn't wish to punish him more than he punishes himself. So he is, again, a much nicer character and a juxtaposing character to Scrooge. Now, he's also a reminder of the love of family. So I did go over Fan a couple of slides ago, where we talked about how she enriched Scrooge's life. So when we see the Ghost of Christmas Past and when we see the flashbacks, we see Fan taking Scrooge home, convincing their father to be less cruel and to take Scrooge home and to spend time with him over Christmas. Fan really showers Scrooge with so much familial love. And just like his mother, Fred shows Scrooge kindness and he encourages the Christmas spirit in him. Now, Scrooge showed genuine love and affection for Fan in the past. So what's really interesting here is that he loved his sister, and it's very clear from the past that he cared for his sister, and he's excited to see her when he goes into this flashback. However, he dishonors her memory completely by treating her son with contempt, with hatred, with rudeness. And again, this kind of really symbolizes him just shutting out the lessons of his past and forgetting all that love and kindness that he had in order to pursue wealth. That's what he did. He dropped all of the love and the happiness that he had when he was younger, and just went after wealth. So we see this love from Fan, we see this caring from Fezziwig, and we see romantic love from Belle, and yet he pushes all of them away because he pursues wealth. He pursues money for no other reason than to hoard it. He's not even enjoying his money. So this girl who had shown him all this love, his sister, he just dishonors her memory, and he will not show her son the same love. And actually, when asked about his nephew and Fan by the Ghost of Christmas Past, Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind and answered briefly yes, that Fred is Fan's son. And what's really interesting is that he's uneasy. Before he seemed so confident, didn't he? When we first see him, when he's talking to Fred and to Bob, and when he's talking to people who aren't the ghosts, he's very, very confident in saying, "Bah humbug, I hate Christmas," very, very rude. And then he seems uneasy. So we can say that he seems uneasy because actually there's a hint from that adjective that there's some guilt there. That something is plaguing his mind, that something is making him perhaps feel a bit of remorse. And he answers briefly. So again, zooming in on that adverb, to answer someone briefly means you sort of want to be out of that conversation. And so he says yes, very, very quickly, to talk about Fred, which again could suggest that he's quite ashamed of his actions. He doesn't want to acknowledge that link between Fred and Fan, because then he has to acknowledge the fact that he's completely dishonored Fan's memory. And the last thing that we need to know about Fred is that he links to his mother, and that's really, really important. So Fred is a ray of hope for Scrooge. Scrooge is a man without children, and Fred is a man without a mother. So Fred is Scrooge's last chance at a blood-related family. Although at the end, he does become like a second father to Tiny Tim, Fred is Scrooge's last remaining family member, and Fred means that there is hope for Scrooge. The introduction of Fred's character means that Scrooge does have family out there, and actually makes it all the more tragic that he chooses to be miserable and he chooses to be a miser, because he has other options. And Fred ends by being this sort of lifeline for Scrooge, who goes to Fred's house, and actually he has somewhere to go. He can go somewhere. He has people who will spend time with him. He has a family. So it's lovely at the end where he gets to go and see Fred, you know, this forgiving, lovely man who will never turn him away. So it makes Scrooge's present all the more tragic, but it makes his future a lot brighter. So Fred really is a great tool for Dickens to show that there are second chances and you can make amends with the people who love you. So that's everything you need to know about Fred, and that's a rundown of his character and some key quotes. So again, please like, subscribe and comment if you have any questions or you have any requests for videos as well. Thank you.